should be going live in a second.
Okay.
And we are live.
All right.
Hello to Emma Bland Smith in the dark basement in San Francisco.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
No, you're not happy. I'm happy. and you should say, I'm happy to be there.
All right.
And I'm happy to be there. So it's incredible that we can have these discussions all the way from Tel Aviv to San Francisco. It's incredible.
It really is.
And
It's
I'm deeply honored to meet you because you are a wonderful author and you are an incredibly generous person. I know that because we've talked for only 8 minutes, but I get these first impressions that are hard to break. So Emma Bland Smith, thanks so much for being on the show. This show is the children's literature channel of the New Books Network, which I am fortunate to host. And let's start with you. You're celebrating 3 new books. It was hard to choose one of them, so why don't you just show us all of them?
Okay. Twist my arm.
Okay.
Let's see.
Which one of them?
So this past year, I had 3 books come out that I was so proud of. This, The Gardener of Alcatraz, came out in April, and this is the story. All 3 of these stories are what I would call narrative nonfiction. So which is so fun to write. So it's nonfiction, but as a lot of people probably already know, it's nonfiction that's written with all the different techniques of fiction. So you're trying to make a nonfiction book be just as unput downable as fiction. So you've got tension and drama and a high point and a resolution and characters and dialogue, but all without inventing anything. So it's not a genre I ever thought I would write, but here I am. I love writing it. And every book is like a puzzle to try to figure out, how am I going to take only the facts that are there, not make anything up, but somehow come out with a book that kind of reads like a fiction story. So this one, I love The Gardener of Alcatraz. It's about a prisoner in Alcatraz in the 1940s who was sort of saved by gardening on the island. And then this one came out, How Science Saved the Eiffel Tower, in July. And I grew up living quite a bit in France and speaking French. And so I had always kind of wanted to write a book about France. And so when I learned this really cool story about the man who built the Eiffel Tower, and it really hadn't been turned into a book yet, I was so excited. So that one, that came out, and I love that one. I love the illustrators of all of these books. And then Mr. McCloskey's Marvelous Mallards is my last one. It came out in November. And this is obviously about Robert McCloskey. And there's a very funny anecdote about how he illustrated Make Way for Ducklings. And that's what this book is about.
Okay, so this is the one we're supposed to focus on today. But before we focus on them, go back and tell us the illustrator's name and the publisher, because you work with the best publishers and illustrators in the business. So let's mention them.
For these 3 books?
Yes.
So absolutely. So Jen Eli illustrated The Gardener of Alcatraz. She's amazing. She does animation. She worked on the latest Pinocchio film that came out. Just want to give a shout out to her. And I think an illustrator who does animation is really cool because they know how to tell a story in words. And this book—
1 second. So just show us the double spread now that we're there.
Yeah, let's see. Oh my gosh.
A random double spread. Emma, you're too productive. I'm going to have to spend 2 hours interviewing you. It'll be dark in San Francisco.
There.
Lovely.
So she just had this beautiful way of, as he changed, the more color was brought into the book. And it's just beautiful. She did a beautiful job. And this book is from Charles Bridge, and I am so grateful to Charles Bridge. They just did a wonderful job. This book is from Capstone, and they, as you know, they cater a lot to the school and library market, but this is also a trade book, but they really know what they're doing. They're a great publisher, and it's illustrated by Leah Vizirin, and I believe she lives in Romania. And I love her illustrations. They almost have kind of a steampunk sort of vibe to them. Let's see. I'll try to find one of the.
Try to find the towering image.
Let's see. Here's a
Sorry about
beautiful
that.
one from the back of the book.
Exactly.
For the view from the top of the Eiffel Tower, and just the period details that she put into that book are wonderful. And I just noticed I need to plug in my laptop, so I'm going to take 10 seconds and hang on. Sorry about that.
Okay, and in the meantime, I'm going to sing a song. Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila Benismacha. Oh, I haven't sung that in 40 years. Okay, so we're here with Emma Blank-Smith. How nice. Oh, you're back. Okay, great.
That was fast. All right.
Yeah.
And then lastly,
you saved me because I was singing Hava Nagila. I don't even remember the words. Okay, go on.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that. The McCloskey book is from Calkins Creek. They have published, I have 2 other books with them, one that's already out and one that's coming out, and they're wonderful. They specialize in American history, nonfiction, and historical fiction.
And they're an imprint of Astra.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's right. And I think you are connected with, or you know,
Harold.
No,
I know Harold. Very obliquely
I think he's with
connected.
Astronaut. Yeah, that's right. No, they're great. And then it's illustrated by Becca Stadlander, and she is wonderful. I had sort of a crush on her before this book. I loved her illustrations, and I kind of ran her name by my editor, who contacted her, and she agreed to do it. So I felt very lucky. She has sort of a folk art style, which I really like, and she just did the Ducklings in such an adorable way.
Okay, well, we're going to get back to this book because we're going to try and focus on it. I have trouble focusing. So and you have 5 other books under the table.
Yes, my magic table. Yeah, I have yeah. So I guess 5 others that came out before that. Just
mention them.
All right, I'll just show you really briefly each one. This was my my very first book, Journey. I love this book so much because it was my first. It'll always have a special place in my heart. It's actually part fiction, part nonfiction, but that's the book that really made me realize that nonfiction can be fun and challenging to write.
And award-winning.
That book did really well. It won a couple of awards, which just blew my mind. I had no idea that was going to happen. I was completely shocked. And I think to this day, that book probably, along with, I forgot to bring Claude, the book about the white alligator. I have my white alligator right here. Okay. So I forgot it upstairs. But
Claude is hiding today.
Yes, Claude is hiding.
We just don't have time for the alligators.
Yeah, sorry, Claude. He gets a lot of attention, so he's good.
I'm going to have you back.
Okay. But I do think that Claude and Journey are probably the books that kids like the most, because kids love animal books and animal success stories. So To Live on an Island is a book that I wrote about imagining what it would be like to live, for kids to live on an island where you have to take the ferry to go to school. And that is set in the San Juan Islands up in Washington State. This is Odin, Dog Hero of the Fires. So this is a story about a dog who survived the 2017 wildfires in California and saved his goats. And it's a true story. I got to meet the dog himself. And that one also kids love because, again, animals. And then The Pig War is a little bit more lofty and high-minded than those books. So for that reason, it perhaps it just appeals on a different level. This is one of my favorites. I had a lot of fun writing this with a sort of kind of a funny voice, which was really fun to write in. And it was illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators in the whole world, Allison J., who illustrates in this kind of crackly art style. And it's just a fascinating story. And it was, but it's historical. So it's a book that I think is sometimes used in classrooms, like fourth grade classrooms, things like that. And I think that's it. Yes, I forgot Claude, but yeah.
Next time. So you are incredibly prolific. Let's now go back to babyhood. Tell us all about yourself. Emma, Bland, and then Smith. Start at the very beginning, the
Oh my
early
goodness.
1800s. I don't care.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I grew up here in San Francisco, and my husband and I met at the same preschool. We've known each other since we were 3 years old. We went to preschool here in San Francisco, and we kind of were, there was a group of us who all grew up together and went to the same schools. And we, so we are now have been married for almost 20 years, and we have 2 kids, but we have this shared history. We know all this. We're both from here. All of our family lives nearby. My parents just live a block away. So we have kind of a nice community here in San Francisco. We've lived other places. We went and lived in New York for 4 years, which was a dream of both of ours. And that was wonderful. And we've lived a couple other places for school and grad school.
Okay.
So
and now back to your babyhood. You started out as Emma Bland.
Yes.
You're anything but Bland, but what kind of name is Bland?
I think it's an English name. So I think my family is English, German, Scottish, and something else. I can't remember on the 2 sides. And let's see. My mom is from Chicago. My dad's from California. They met at UC Berkeley in the 60s. So they were very, very 60s Berkeley,
Hippies,
California.
hippie parents.
Yes. Yeah. So that was, my mom made all her own bread, that kind of thing. And my dad was a professor at UC Berkeley. And after my parents got married, they decided they wanted to live in France, and they took off, and my dad worked in Paris and Switzerland and Scotland for 4 years. And my brother and I were born over there. So that was definitely sort of something kind of important in my life. We continued to go back to Europe my entire life. And I've always just loved France in particular so much.
So you grew up speaking Francais.
Yes, we moved back when I was
we could have this entire interview in French.
We could probably have it. I'm getting a little rusty, but I will say that I was in 4th grade when we moved to France. And it was a great age for learning French. And I just went to the little village school down the street, and I didn't speak a word of French. I was just thrown in. And my mom always says, by Christmas, I was speaking fluent French, like a little French girl. So that was an incredible experience. And I went on to study French and get a master's degree in French. And, now I really don't use my French, but I enjoy it.
And daddy, a professor of French?
My dad is a professor of physics at San Francisco State University.
Wow.
That was he's
You've wandered far from the fold, my dear.
Yes, that's true. I did not turn into a scientist. That's true. But there are a lot of writers and artists in my family, so I feel like it somehow.
I'm happy to hear that. And your mom is on which side of the science art?
My mom is definitely the artist. Her dad was an artist, and my mom is sort of an amateur artist. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So, I mean, that explains your narrative nonfiction here.
I guess so. I suppose so. That's where, I think I have a sense of logic that I get from my dad, for sure. Yeah.
So let's now talk about you as a young little girl. What were your favorite picture books? Did you have angst at the age of 5? Do you write to your 5-year-old self, Emma?
Gosh, let's see. Well, my favorite books, I don't really remember my favorite picture books. I remember writing, starting when I was about 6, really just reading, really jumping into chapter books like The Little House, in the Little House books, which I know is just such a cliche, but I read those books over and over and over. And then as I got older, I read Anne of Green Gables over and over and over. When I was in middle school, I got really into Gerald Durrell. Do you know Gerald Durrell, the English writer who he wrote My Family and Other Animals. He was a naturalist and I loved his books. I read James Herriot, the vet, the English veterinarian. I read his books over and over. So I did a lot of rereading. I would just go to sleep reading my favorite books over and over. And I think I always say that I think that really influenced it, really had something to do with me becoming a writer, because you're kind of seeing these words, they just become implanted and they become part of you.
And you love animals, even though you did not grow up on a farm.
I do love animals. Yes, I had rabbits. I got my first bunny when I lived in France in the village. There was a lady who kept rabbits and to eat, that my parents asked if I could have a baby rabbit. And so she gave me a baby and I raised him in our little attic that whole year. And at the end of the year, we had to give him back. And she promised us that she would keep him and never eat him. And so that's what we decided to believe.
That's what you decided to believe.
Yes. We didn't ask any more questions beyond that. Yeah. So that was Fluffy, my first rabbit. And yeah, I've always liked rabbits. And I think that most kids like rabbits. Animals, sorry. Most kids like animals.
Yeah, no. And most kids like rabbits, but in France, they really like rabbits.
They really like rabbits and they really eat rabbits. And today it's hard for me to imagine eating rabbit, but growing up and living as a young adult, when I went to France so often, we ate rabbit all the time. Rabbit stew, lapin à la moutarde. And today I've kind of gotten away from that. But yeah, in America, we just like to cuddle bunnies. But in France, they go both ways with the rabbits.
Or to knuffle them.
To knuffle them, yes. That's sweet. Yeah, so I have found that animals are a great thing to write about for kids because they love them, and it can be a way to, I hadn't even thought about this before writing them, but I've gotten so many letters from kids about the animal books, about the wolf and the dog and Claude the alligator. And I realized that it's a really great way to be able to write about bigger subjects through the lens of an animal.
So what happened in your career as a student, as a child, that prompted you to get into the writing field?
Well, let's see. I think I always wanted to be a writer. When I was a kid, I think I used to say I wanted to be either a teacher or an artist or a writer. And I just read, again, it's such a cliche that writers say, but I just read nonstop, and I read everything, things that were way too mature for me, things that today I would consider boring. I just read everything. And when I went to college, I majored in French, and I started to dabble in writing. I wrote for the college yearbook and things like that. Then I went off to get my master's degree in French. And when I was done with that, I decided I did not want to be in academia anymore. And I wanted to write something more real life, more approachable. And that's when I went to New York and I started working in magazines, and I worked in women's magazines for 4 years. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun. It was sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum from academia. It was quite fluffy. I was writing a lot of, things like 5 ways to lose weight this month and things like that. But I learned a lot. Working for a magazine, you learn to write economically, you learn to edit your work, you learn to fact check everything and make sure that you don't use the same word twice in a paragraph. Like all these things were just drilled into me. So I really did get a good foundation in writing, working for women's magazines. And then after that, when I moved back to San Francisco is when I really tried to make a go of being a freelance writer. And I did that for a couple of years. And then when my kids were little is when I rediscovered children's books and realized, oh my goodness, this is what I want to write. I want to write beautiful children's books that parents will read to their kids.
Okay, but there's millions of parents who have the same awakening moment, or they tell their kids the story about the rabbit who got away that they invent, and their kids love this story and say, oh, I can be a writer.
Right.
So you're still one of millions here. How did you become a super author. And I keep saying this, I'm going to say it again, Emma. You realize that you are one of, I don't know, 100,000 people that want to write for kids. You have award-winning books, many, many books. You're so highly regarded. Do you realize that you are one of 100,000 authors?
I don't think about it that way a lot. I have to admit, it's hard once you're in the kidlit world. You're surrounded by people who have more.
No, but I mean, you don't you? Oh my goodness! Don't you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, "I'm Emma Bland Smith." Mon Dieu, mon Dieu, mon petit lapin.
Oh my gosh, no,
Je
definitely
suis connu
not.
dans le monde entier.
Dans tout le monde, je ne sais pas. Non, je crois que non.
No.
I definitely don't. But thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
You see people who have other bigger deals, more books, fiction. You have to lose.
I think
you have to lose this,
It's a little bit, and you know this as well, just it's a little bit of it's a brutal world. It's a difficult world. And I'm someone who definitely has trouble remembering that I've done some good things. It's I don't think that way every day.
You have to get the lovely Mr. Smith. What does he do? You didn't tell me.
He works in biostatistics.
Oh my goodness. Well, you have to ask him every morning to give you a tiny little bonk on the forehead with your 8 marvelous books and remind you of who you are. You're incredible.
You.
So let's go back now. So you have this journey, which is a journey which does enable you to be one of the 5,000 writers who get publishing deals, which is coming in from a history of loving books and a background in working in magazines, which prepares you for your journey. But how did journey happen? How did you break in?
Sure. Let's see. I think I joined SCBWI. I tried to do all the right things. I tried to be realistic about how this was going to happen. And I certainly made the mistake that I think we all do, which is that I thought the first thing I wrote would get published. But luckily, I persisted, and I tried to do all the right things. I joined SCBWI as soon as I found out about it. I found some local authors, and I joined a critique group. Today, I'm in 2 different critique groups, and that's wonderful. One of them is online, and one of them is in person. And
that's how I found you.
Oh, right. Well, yes.
Annabelle.
It was, yeah. Annette, yes.
Annette.
That's right. We were in a promotional group together.
Thank you, Annette.
Supportive of each other. Yeah. And there are so many things like that work in this industry where people suggest things and they recommend people. And so a lot of that kind of networking has a bad rap, but nice networking. And so I started querying.
Hold on. Networking is critical. Let's get back to that in a few minutes. Okay. You just landed on something that's important.
All right. So I'm thinking back. I started querying agents, and I would spend a lot of time researching agents. And one thing I think that I did that I would recommend to people is that I queried a lot. I didn't stop to think, is this the right agent for me? I would just send my stuff to everyone who was open to submissions, because I figured you just can't tell from a website if this person is ideal for me. There's just no way to know. And so why not just try? So I queried a lot, and really didn't get anywhere, but at least it kind of got me into the trenches of like figuring out how it's done.
You were querying with fiction or nonfiction?
At that point, fiction. And
could you just give us a 1-sentence pitch of your first fiction submission?
Yeah, let's see. I don't remember. Let's see, one of my early ones was, oh yeah, I still love this, but I have not been able to get it published. A year going throughout the 12 months of a year, following the seasons. It's a little child who's going throughout the year and who is baking something different with seasonal ingredients from every month. And I still think it was nicely written, but that book just did not quite have enough of an arc, of a narrative arc or a hook to really feel very marketable. And that is, yeah. So and that's been a learning experience for me. So not super marketable. However, eventually, after about, I think it was about 6-7 years, one agent wrote back to me and said, I really like your writing, and I wonder if we could have a phone call. And that was my agent. And so that finally happened. And it was just the most exciting day of my life.
What did
But
you
it
do?
took a long time. It took a long time of lots and lots of submitting and querying and being patient.
So do you want to holler out to your agent, or shall I?
Oh, sure. No, I'll say her name. She's very modest, so I never know whether she wants me to talk about her, but her name is Esty White, and she runs Storm Literary Agency. And there are a couple other agents on board at this point, but Essie started it, and this was in the very early days. And one thing I would suggest is that authors look out when you're querying, is you look out for agents who are maybe just starting their own agency, because they're looking to acquire authors, and they're more open. So that is when that worked for me.
It's wonderful. Agents, I've had several agents on the show. I would love to have Esty on the show if you ask her. They are remarkable in the conversations you can have with them. But generally, they take on 1 in 1,000 submissions.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are the odds. So I'm gonna beg your forgiveness, because this drives me crazy. I saw on Facebook this morning, take a course on how to be a published author. And it's either free or you pay money, but it's bullshit. You cannot take a course and become a published author. The odds are still 1 to 100 against you, even if you're a really good author.
Right.
What we all have.
Yeah, it really feels very unfair.
It took you 6 or 7 years of querying.
Right.
And you did all the right things. But you are still one of 100 really good authors who got a deal, and you're one of 1,000 authors who got a deal, and you're one of 50,000 authors who have so many wonderful books out.
I will say also that I did take courses. I forgot to say that, but you're absolutely right. The course is not a path to, it's not a ticket to getting published, but it just, it helps you, especially when you're just starting out, when you haven't really analyzed picture books, especially for picture book writing. I mean, not really, that I would say also for chapter book writing, but when it's such a great thing. I took a couple courses that really kind of made me realize what the arc of a picture book is, and what how to make, the formula, as it were, for a picture book that then you can expand on. So I definitely recommend taking courses. But yes, absolutely, that is not going to get you published. It's just another tool that you can do to develop your skill.
Yeah, this marketing business drives me nuts. Okay, so you found Esty, and Esty found you, and how fortunate both of you are. And which was the story you pitched to her? Journey?
No. So I pitched her a couple stories. The 2 that she liked were stories that I still like, but are still not published. One of them was about a little girl who plants a garden, and the other one was about a boy who finds a caterpillar in his kindergarten classroom, and then the caterpillar grows and he lets it go at the end. And she liked both of those books, and she submitted them. They didn't get anywhere, but very early on in the process, I sent her the manuscript for Journey, about the wolf, the wild wolf, because I had this idea I had seen a couple other books about real life animals, and I had thought, oh, maybe I could do that. Maybe that's something that I could write. And then I saw a newspaper article about this wild wolf, did a little research, wrote the manuscript, showed it to Essie, and she right away said, oh, I think this is something that editors are looking for. This sort of nonfiction is kind of, it's a thing right now. And she submitted that, and that got picked up right away. And so after that, I pretty much did not do any more just traditional fiction. However, I will say that those stories, the writing that I did, I think it was very valuable because I used those skills in writing narrative nonfiction. It's really using all the same, it's writing in very much the same way. So it's not like it was wasted work all of those years, I hope.
In your case, no work was wasted because Journey won awards. It catapulted you to picture book stardom, and you weren't just like a one trick. I wouldn't say one trick wolf. You've been publishing wonderful stuff. Let's focus a little bit now on what we wanted to talk about mostly today, which was your incredible Mr. McCloskey and the Mallards book. How and you have this uncanny ability to, you call it narrative fiction, but it's a kind of a slice of life. It's an episode. To hone in on a particular episode.
That's right.
And you can't talk about a person's entire life, and to pick one that's very funny and very humorous and very poignant. Run us through the as you fish out the duck book from your pile, Emma.
You're right to use that term, slice of life, because that's a term that I use when people are talking about writing picture book biographies. You have this choice of writing, sometimes they'll use the phrase cradle to grave, so the whole life of the person, or slice of life. And many people do write cradle to grave, and it's just that is that's ambitious. And I like the slice of life approach because it's more focused, it's more narrow. So this is the book, obviously, that we all know, although not as many children know this book today as when we were growing up, because sometimes I will ask in presentations, raise your hand if you've read Make Way for Ducklings. And it's not necessarily, it's just there's so many more books today. There were so many fewer books when we were kids. But this is a book that I think has stood the test of time. It doesn't feel terribly dated when you read it. It still is charming. The illustrations are absolutely charming. And so, many of us have always loved this book. So the thing is, the behind the scenes of how a book was written is usually just not that interesting. It's just someone sits down and they write and they write and they write and they edit and so on. And so there had been a couple other books about authors, their backgrounds, like there's great picture books. There's one about E.B. White and about Ezra Jack Keats, and like lots of as well as authors of books for adults like Jane Austen. And so I think I had already been thinking like, oh, is there a famous picture book writer that I could write about? Who do I love? And then I was sort of maybe doing a little bit of research, and I read this story somewhere about Robert McCloskey, about how in order to illustrate Make Way for Ducklings, he literally bought a box of baby tiny little ducklings, brought them home on the subway in New York, and lived with them in his studio, and they took over. I mean, it must have been such a mess. And they lived with him for months and months while he drew them, trying to get the illustrations perfect. So that was such a funny, unique story of a creation of a book that I thought, oh, I definitely think this could be a book. It has funny visuals because of the ducklings, and then there's also this through line of his persistence. So he was a perfectionist, and it was never good enough, and he kept trying and trying, and then he kept failing. And I know this is something that we talk a lot. You hear a lot of people talking about that it's okay to fail, and it's okay. And failing is not even failing. Failing is just a step on your on your journey towards success, and every time you don't succeed, it makes the end result better. So that is sort of like the theme of the book. And then the funny ducklings running all over the place is the funny visual. And
can you show the this is also going to be a podcast for the people who are watching. And of course, this is a wonderful book. Everybody should go out and buy all of Emma Bland Smith's books. They're incredible. And then I will tell you where she lives so you can get them autographed.
I love this picture because this is the one of him sitting on the subway. And he drew a little sketch of that book that's in the archive, of that scene that's in the archive. So that was a funny one. And then here is basically just here are some of the funny scenes. These are the ducks in the bathtub. And this is him just working with the ducklings everywhere. And there were some funny stories. He said in an interview that the woman who lived downstairs from him came up and banged on the door and said that the floor was leaking because the ducks were splashing so much. So little stories, whenever I read a little anecdote like that, or like the anecdote about him sitting on the subway with the box of ducks, those are things that went into the story. Because often with these stories, you have you're reading through the primary sources, you're trying to find primary sources, and he's not alive anymore to ask. I can't ask him anything. So anything like that, you just grab it and you say, oh, that's definitely going in the book.
I bet my late mother would call this a Michigas. Michigas, you know the word Michigan?
Oh, yes.
This is like such an eccentric thing. In the book, you don't apologize for it. It's like you're deadpanning it, Like, of course, what a great idea, I'll have 100 ducks and geese and maybe a few eagles and hawks in my apartment in New York. What could be what could be more normal? But it's a Michigan.
Yeah, I love that.
In the end, he gets his duck.
Yes.
And what I love is your back matter. You have tons of back matter, including a letter from his daughter.
Yes, so that was exciting. I reached out to, he has two daughters, and a lot of people know them from Blueberries for Sal. That was his daughter Sal, and he has another daughter Jane. And so I reached out to them, and let's see, there's a picture of them. He's drawing them right there. I reached out to them by email, which is always, I'm not a super outgoing person. And so things like that are hard for me, but I always push myself to do it, to reach out to people. And Jane McCloskey wrote back to me, and she and I corresponded over the course of the next couple of years. And she read the manuscript because I had to have it fact checked and make sure that everything was accurate. And she read it, and I was very nervous, but luckily she approved it. She liked everything. She liked the illustrations. She read the illustrations, and she said she thought they were fine. And then she agreed to write a little note, like a note from Jane McCloskey in the back of the book, where she just talked more about her dad and what it was like being the daughter of a famous illustrator, about how she used to pose for him and things like that. But that was definitely a little like brush with stardom for me to be. She still lives on the island that he lived on. And if you read his books, most of his books are set on this island. And so it's exciting. It was exciting to imagine.
Emma, I wouldn't say that McCloskey is forgotten, but he's a bit faded over the past decades. And one of the great things about your book is you brought him back to life.
Oh, thank you. That's funny. I never thought of it that way.
And that's such a wonderful, gracious thing you've done. And while I'm here, or there, I have this wonderful idea I want to pitch to you.
Okay.
If you don't do it, I'm going to do it. But okay. I'm not going to do it because I don't like writing nonfiction. You like France, and you like Paris. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether anybody has written the backstory of Madeline and Ludwig Bemelmans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know he has an interesting story. I'm jotting that down right now on my piece of paper here.
And now, you know, we're live. So if you ever make that book, if it wins the Caldecott or whatever your books win, I'll be able to say, oh, I was there.
I will thank you in the book. You will be
Will
part
you
of
really?
it.
Will you really?
Of course. I'm always grateful to that. Many of the books there was a person who suggested it to me, and I'm always grateful for that. Because sometimes they seem so obvious, but until someone really points it out to you, you don't think about it. Yeah, I'll look into that. I almost wonder if there's a reason that there hasn't been a book about him and Madeline yet. But sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just no one has thought to do it. And Madeline was one of the books.
McCloskey is right up there, and you wrote the book about the book.
Yes. Oh, I do want to say really quick, if that reminds me before I forget. And this happens a lot with picture book biographies. There is someone else who I think her book comes out next month, who just happened to be writing about McCloskey at the same time. Her book I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds delightful. It's called Make Way. And it's about Robert McCloskey, and at the same time, it has parallel narrative. It's about a woman who wrote, Nancy Shun, who made the statues that are very famous that are in the Boston Gardens, the Ducklings statues. And so she follows him and she follows her. And her book comes out next month, and I'm excited to see it. Sometimes these things happen. It's sort of like there's something in the air that sometimes there'll be 3 books about someone who happened to come out the same year, and you just kind of have to, capitalize that on that and say, let's do an event together, and everyone talks each other up. So anyway, I do want to mention her book, but yeah. I loved. Madeline was definitely one of the books that I could recite.
Who's the author? Who's the author of the other book?
That's Angela. Angela Burke.
Let's have her on the show.
Yeah.
Let's reach out to her.
I'll write to her and yeah.
I would love to have both of you on the show together.
Oh, that would be fun.
And talk about your McCloskey experience and what brought you to each of you in your own separate way to write this book.
that would be so fun. Yeah, I'd love to.
I told you that the interview would last 40 minutes, and we're already at 43, and we haven't talked about Alcatraz, and we haven't talked about your white alligator, and I'm just gonna have to ask you back. That's all.
Well, that would be wonderful. You are so fun to talk to. I can't believe it. You're
too
natural.
Kind. It's a labor of love. I must tell you that I am, and I'm not saying this, I'm not facetious at all. I'm in awe to interview you and other fantastic authors.
Oh,
and everybody has a story of how they succeeded and how they got to where they are. And you publish with the best illustrators in the business, the best publishing houses. You have a wonderful agent, and people might say, "Oh, Emma was lucky," and I'm sure that there were, along your journey where you were lucky. But when the luck smiles at you, then you have to have the goods, and lady, you really have the goods. I just in parting, I'm remembered of my French hero, Louis Pasteur, who said something like, Lazare ne sourit qu'aux les esprits bon préparés, which means in English, if I got it right, that the fortune does not smile except on those who are well prepared. So Emma, you've been well prepared. And it was, we have to go, but I'll have you back. And it was a real honor and tons of fun to interview you. And I would love to see some of your fiction.
I didn't really, I always forget to mention it, but I did have 2 fiction chapter book series published. Each one is a series of 4 books. This is called Maddie McGuire, CEO, about a girl who keeps coming up with business ideas. So Pet Camp is her first idea. And then this book is a series called Gavin McNally's Year Off, about a boy who spends a year traveling around the country with his parents. And this is the first book in 4. So anyway, those were really very different. So not fiction picture
One
books.
second, the chapter book about the girl who comes up with these harebrained ideas. When was that published?
Gosh, that was published maybe about 5 years ago, something like that. 2019. So 4 years ago.
Okay. Listen, can you send me the PDF and I will read it?
Sure. Oh.
Because I don't interview enough chapter book authors. And maybe I should.
Yes, so, I have some great ideas for you. One of my good critique partners does both picture book and wonderful chapter books. She'd be great. So if you ever want some suggestions.
Okay, well, we have a lot of ideas and we're going to go offline now. And thank everybody, especially you, to Emma Bland-Smith and to S.T. White, who discovered you, and your wonderful illustrators and publishers, and your parents who grew such a wonderful lady up, your husband, whom you've known since the age of 2.5, and to thank you for being on the show. And I'm Mel Rosenberg, and I'm the host of the Children's Literature channel of the New Books Network, and I even got it right this time. So Emma, I hope we'll be in touch. It was delightful having you on the show, and take care. And write me some fiction.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.